And that really is the big thing. That is a big stack of money when you're standing right next to it, right there. And so one of the great things too about social media, one of the things that makes social media so attractive is that it doesn't take a lot of this to actually accomplish what you want to do. So that's one of the draws to it from, say, a small business or somebody who's starting out on their own or a nonprofit that has very little budget. They say, we don't have much of a marketing budget, so let's check out the whole social media space and let's figure out what we can do. What most companies are not necessarily always aware of is they say it doesn't cost money, but they're not aware of the time that goes into it. So that's part of, we're not going to get a ton into all the ways that you can spend your time in social media to do it well from a marketer's perspective and to actually get the return. But I think that's one of the points that tends to be missed on a fairly regular basis. So if we talked about, okay, investment is not just money, investment is also time. Well, what about social media? So let's go back to the coin for a second. I actually, anybody know who the president is on this coin? Eisenhower? Yes, I would expect barcamp would be smart enough to know. All right, I have one right here. Eisenhower. I actually use a coin as a great way to understand social media, okay? Social media is like a coin, has two sides. One side of the coin is content, on the other side of the social media coin is conversation. This is the currency of social media, content and conversation, okay? So it is always a coin with two sides. Now, depending on the tool that you're going to use, you lead sometimes with content, and other times you lead with conversation. So for instance, a tool like user-generated content tools like blogs, podcasts, YouTube, that sort of thing, you lead with content, and then conversation is secondary. It's still part of the coin, you just have one side of the coin that's up, and one side of the coin that's down. Conversely, Twitter is a social networking platform, Facebook, LinkedIn, that sort of thing. You lead in those cases with conversation, and then content is secondary in that case as well. So I think the coin is actually pretty helpful in sort of thinking about, okay, if I want to make sure I have the right perspective on what social media is. Now, an interesting thing about this particular coin, if you flip it over, you get this Latin phrase here. Any Latin scholars in the room? E pluribus unum? Yes. Out of many one, you get Greg. Greg, man, Greg, good to see you. I didn't recognize you with the glare coming off here. E pluribus unum, out of many one. So what this means for America's sake is out of many types of people who come from all over the world, we are this melting pot and we become one people. Okay, it's very American to say that. It's on most of the money that we have, most of the currency we have, e pluribus unum. This is a very social media type of perspective as well. Out of many voices comes one predominant voice, one predominant perspective. And I think many organizations that are trying to think about social media, how social media gets integrated into their company, into their brand, they do not consider the e pluribus unum perspective of social media for their business. The interesting thing about social media, when it relates to return on investment and this whole concept, is that investment, when you think about money, it is my money I'm investing into whatever it is I hope to accomplish. But when you start to think about social media, and social media being voices, and out of many voices comes one voice from a perspective, all of a sudden you have to say, it is not just my voice, it is many voices. It is perhaps hundreds and thousands of voices. And just because I have some goals, I have some desires, I want to see some things met for my business to, for my objectives to be reached, it is not necessarily the case that I'm going to get to control that. One of the great things I love about social media, this scares the heck out of some people, this really invigorates other people, is that you don't have as much control in the social media space as you think you did. I have heard of company executives say, we are not going to start blogging because people might say bad things about us, okay? The inference there is that if they start blogging, people will then say bad things about them because for whatever reason, they think people are not already saying bad things about them on blogs that they already have, okay? We looked it up. They are saying plenty of bad things about them. They are not blogging yet. The big shift to me is that in the world of returning on investment is what if, in the social media space, it's not so much about return on investment, but return on voice. I think this is where we begin to have a mental perspective, a mental change to say, we are not so much interested in, we do want a return on investment in the traditional sense. We do want we do financially want to come back around. And so if we are thinking about social media from a marketing perspective, we do want to see a return on that. But what kind of investment is it? So is it a monetary investment? Is it a time investment? And in the world of social media, the time goes into that content and conversation, that two sides of the coin that I was just talking about. So what you really are tracking then in the world of social media is the return on voice. The interesting thing about the world of social media is that there is a return on voice for you, for your organization, for your brand, whether you care to be involved or not. So the example that I was just talking about, the company had said, the executive said, we don't want to start blogging because people might say bad things about them. So in his flawed perspective, I would say, he thought that his lack of contribution, his lack of activity, his lack of engagement was preventing something from being said. The fact of the matter is there was already a return on voice for his company. He just wasn't part of it. And I think this is one of the big shifts that needs to be made when any organization is thinking about social media, that there will be a return on voice for your company, for your brand, for your executives, for your products, for your services, for all of that stuff, whether you choose to be part of that or not. This is where the social media return on investment begins to turn from the more traditional sense. It is not just return on investment monetarily, it is return on voice and choosing whether or not you're going to be a part of that. One of the things, because social media allows anyone to have a voice, that's where having this perspective sort of comes into play. Is anybody familiar with these guys? United Breaks Guitars. Okay, this is a guy named Dave Carroll. Dave is in a band, I forget the name of the band. Anybody know off the top of your head? Greg? Okay, you know Latin, but you don't know Dave's band. That's probably better. Okay, I understand. All right, Dave Carroll is in a band. It's a Canadian band. Some time ago, about a year or so ago, he and his band were flying United Airlines, okay? They look out the window, and they see some guys throwing their guitars around in the background. A lady behind them says, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. The baggage handlers are throwing guitars. The guys in the band, not knowing the lady behind them, look out and say, those are our guitars that they're throwing around out there. They get to their destination, I think it was Omaha, Nebraska, or someplace like that. Open it up, the bass player's bass guitar is broken. This guy's $3,500 Taylor guitar, broken. He spends about 9 months talking to United, and at the end of this whole process, basically what they say is, Dave, have a nice life. We're sorry your guitar is broken. We do not accept any responsibility for that, despite the eyewitnesses, despite everything. So Dave says, as a singer-songwriter, you should know I'm going to write 3 songs. I am going to make videos. I'm going to put them on YouTube. And if you can imagine, if an organization like United does not have this return on voice type of perspective, they would say, ooh, YouTube, you know, you want to Twitter about me too? You know, you can just see where they're like, fine, okay, put your little video on YouTube and have a nice life. Well, can anybody read this little number right here? I took this, this is, I think, 2 days old. As of 2 days ago, 5,700,000 views on this particular video. He has also been interviewed on CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox. I mean, he has gotten nationwide exposure, not to mention just what the YouTube video itself has had. Yes, ma'am.
He also spawned a Southwest campaign to talk about this, and was also David.
Yes, Southwest decided to get their little jab in there as well. This was video number 1. Video number 2 doesn't have nearly this many. So what's interesting is United, who previously, pre-YouTube, the song United Breaks Guitars, and by the way, Google this, you'll find this right off the bat. There are dozens of, hundreds rather, of blogs talking about this. In fact, I forget exactly what the number is, but this phrase, United Breaks Guitars, did not even exist, okay? He made up this term, United Breaks Guitars. I forget what the number is. There's something like 200,000 returns on the phrase United Breaks Guitars. Now, I mean, he coined a phrase that now is going to just be with United until they decide to do something long term. Ironically enough, how many? 12 million references to the phrase United Breaks Guitars. Thank you. That's not good for United, okay? So how about that return on voice, right? Okay.